Let's talk about our hopes and dreams beyond the reach it seems. Let's talk. Confess I live in hell. I failed to fall in scheme. Maybe we can find a pathway forward or a clue. So we may together be a symbiotic harmony where I can talk to you. You can talk to me. Let's talk. Let's talk. Let's talk, let's talk, let's talk.
Good evening and welcome to the Talk Vermont. And I am pleased, my name is Reverend Arnold Thomas, and I am pleased to welcome today the State Senate Majority Leader and a good friend of mine, Kesha Ram Hinsdale.
Thank you, Reverend.
And among other things, we're going to first try and get to know you a little bit better. And then we'll talk about what you do and some of the priorities that you as a state senator and also as a majority Senate leader, what's on your mind? Mm-hmm. So let's start by getting to know you a little bit better. Where you came from, your parents, why did you wind up, I should say why and how did you wind up here in Vermont?
Oh, well, thank you, Reverend, for having me. And we can get into what a Senate Majority Leader even is, but I just finished my first year in that role, and I'm going into my 14th year in the legislature.
Wow.
So it'll be my sixth, it's hard to even say, honestly. It's been a long time. It'll be my sixth year in the Senate, and I spent 8 years in the House. Mm-hmm. As some folks know, because they've seen me around for a while, I started in that role when I was 22.
That's right.
And so, that alone, I think, says a little bit about where I'm coming from and my passion for making a difference through policy and government. Mm-hmm. I originally grew up in Los Angeles, and I would call myself now a climate immigrant. Not a climate refugee. Mm-hmm. I wasn't, forced by circumstances to come here like people are with wildfires now in California. But at the time, as a young person, I only applied to colleges, places where I thought my future children would have cleaner air and cleaner water. Truly, my top choices were Alaska, British Columbia, and New England. And
we were lucky.
I fell in love with Vermont. It is in many ways the West Coast of New England. It's a place people fall in love with when they finally get here. And in fact, on my way here to do this interview, I passed my mother's house. It was always her dream, growing up in Chicago and then LA, to live in Vermont.
Oh.
And she didn't tell me that until after I accepted at the University of Vermont. We were just talking about that the other night because now we have 3 generations here. She's helping me raise my 2 small children. I have a 1-year-old and a 2.5-year-old. And of course, grandchildren are magnets for grandparents. And I'm fortunate that my mother and my stepfather now live in South Burlington, and we're down the road in Shelburne. So, can't really complain about a life where I get to make a difference in Montpelier and come home for bedtime with the kids.
That's great. And you also, along with your work in the State House, you teach structural inequality and environmental justice at the Vermont Law School and Graduate School.
That's right. So I've done that for a few years. This will be my first year that I taught instead at the University of Vermont in the Grossman School of Business, the Sustainable MBA program. With 2 little kids, the commute down to South Royalton 2 times a week just became a bit unrealistic. My heart will always pump green and gold. And I'm trying to talk about more intersections in the academic space at UVM that speak to these issues, where environmental justice meets economic justice, how we really capture the spirit of a generation that would like to see us grow and thrive in our communities and want to make sense of what's happening politically, alongside preserving our natural world and having a future climate and planet for our kids.
Yeah. You mentioned climate refugees, and Vermont is in many ways becoming a haven for climate refugees because of all the other environmental problems that are existing in our nation.
Well, I have an interesting take on that. It's something I think about all the time. And we now have thousands of Vermonters who are experiencing climate displacement, right? So, it's just reframing what we know about being victims of a flood where
That's right.
These are a lot of Vermonters who could not or cannot find another place to live. They may be living in substandard housing that was flooded and that they're trying to rebuild in the same place, or they're desperately trying to get out of floodplains. And so alongside us being a place with fresh water and a relatively stable climate and pretty good government, we also need to make sure we're not creating our own climate refugees. So it's something that takes up a lot of my mental energy, because we also have a lot of climate migrants coming from other places and wanting to keep Vermont just the way it is, but often that means pulling the ladder out from under them in the housing market.
Yeah, that's so true. And I know that you're going to be dealing with that with several other sessions that are taking place in the state regarding that. When you became the Senate Majority Leader, and we're going to talk about what that means, I mentioned earlier to you before we came on air that you and Randy Brock, who was the Senate Minority Leader for a while, probably for a brief moment in history, shared that unique situation where in the whitest state in the Union, and probably in any other part of the state, you and Randy represented the majority and minority leaders, again, in the whitest state, one of the whitest states in the Union, as people of color. You don't find that happening.
You certainly don't, and I've thought about it many times, because Randy and I, last biennium, we served together in the morning on Senate Economic Development and in the afternoon on Senate Finance. And I kept thinking, we're two of the only people of color who've ever served in the state Senate, and here we are sort of making up a big chunk of the conversation about tax policy and economic policy. And it always just threw me a little bit, but made me really proud to be in Vermont, where though progress is slow, at some point people really do think it's important to sometimes overrepresent folks who've been underrepresented.
Yeah. Well, we're glad you both are in the House. So say a little bit more about what does it mean? What does being the Senate Majority Leader entail?
I'm learning myself what it means to be the Senate Majority Leader, and it's a position that you get to leave your own mark on. But it's never been so critical, I think, in the country to think about what it looks like to represent a political party as its leader, and to figure out your relationship with the other political party in our two-party system, more or less. We have a slimmer majority of Democrats in the Senate than we've had since 1997. So there are 30 senators, and we represent largely counties. Chittenden County's cut in half. But of those senators that we have, 17 are Democrats, 13 are Republicans. That means we are 2 votes away at any time, and we don't have the lieutenant governor's seat who breaks ties in the Senate if we're 15-15. And so, for the first time in a long time, we are forced to navigate without having enough of a majority to suspend rules, et cetera, without Republicans. I think the Senate has often been bipartisan regardless. I grew up in a political culture, really grew up in it in my 20s, where I had Republican mentors who would say, if we're both in the same ship, then the majority steers the ship and the minority points out the rocks. And, we work best when we're working together. Scott Beck, the new minority leader, and I share an office. It was going to be given to me because I have 2 little kids, and Senate Agriculture needed a bigger room. But when the minority party said we also need a place to meet, I thought we can work this out. If we can't work this out, we can't work anything out. So, we still, I would say, get along in many ways, share common beliefs about of concern about what's happening at the federal level, and that certainly makes me feel like I can get up every day and work with my counterparts. But what it also means functionally is that I'm trying to keep our Democratic caucus together and navigating uncharted waters together rather than fracturing. And that's its own challenge right now at this time, because we're trying to tackle systemic issues with not only a lack of federal support, but maybe federal hostility. In a time of great despair that has been built on, a recession people never recovered from, and then a tropical storm they never recovered from, and then a pandemic, and then another economic downturn. We are certainly, as legislators, running into a burning building and trying to just make sure we have a hose. And it's getting more and more important. The stakes have never been higher that we try to work with each other and not turn away from tackling the hardest and most politically challenging issues of our time.
And those politically challenging issues certainly are apparent in many ways within our state, probably more so in states where Democrats and Republicans are more clearly and desperately divided. But I'm wondering, you as Senate Majority Leader, and I'm sure Jill Kowinski as the Speaker of the House, you no longer have the supermajority that you had in both houses. What do you think was the reason for that increase in the Republican presence in both the House and the Senate, and how does it, since this is a program that is really addresses the concerns and the interests of people of color in this state, how do you think that increase will affect the Democratic agenda, Democratic/progressive agenda going forward?
Well, I'm using we in the broadest sense because I do feel like I was starting to see a coming fracture in how we understood the economic realities that Vermonters are facing or Americans are facing. But very broadly, we as Democrats lost so many seats for the same reason that we didn't realize we were going to lose so many seats. We weren't paying enough attention. And even if many legislators, regardless of party, live fairly marginally, are not wealthy people, are often working class, retired folks, there is an anger in this country that no amount of shiny objects can satisfy, that governing has become more about self-preservation than about doing the hard things people need done so they can live productive and meaningful lives. And to get really specific about that, people's costs, the cost of living has way outstripped their quality of life. And so after that election, I was traveling the state and I essentially said, I think what Vermonters told us is that they're socially liberal and financially hurting. They are fine with a woman of color being the Senate Majority Leader, but they also need to be able to put food on the table and earn a good wage. And there is a growing anger in this country that somebody else is ahead of me in line. And I've said before, I don't think Republicans have to say, we care about you more. They just have to say to people, they care about you less. And I think we just have a deficit of caring enough about all of the Americans who feel like they're falling through the cracks.
Yeah. So, do you think do you think that message is being heard both sides of the aisle? As Senator Scott Beck is the new representative, the minority Senate representative, is that message being heard within members of his party as well? And how is there a meeting of the minds and the hearts as far as state senators are concerned?
Yeah, I mean, when I said that we received this message, I think there's room for individuals in both parties to say some remember what they heard and interpreted what they heard and stuck with it. And still others, feel really comfortable focusing on a very specific agenda.
Yeah.
And so I don't want to point fingers. I just think people get to the Capitol and, want to leave a mark and show that they did something. And sometimes doing something is worse than doing nothing or undoing some of the regulatory or policy barriers that we've put in place that some might have seen as adding value and others might see as stopping progress. So, I mean, what I hope people do to show up every day as strong policymakers and lawmakers is do their homework and listen to Vermonters and not shy away from tough issues. And regardless of party, there's a lot of folks who are new, who just started in the pandemic or in the aftermath of the pandemic. And we have to rebuild a sense of what it means to compromise, what it means to stay at the table when conversations get hard.
Yeah. So in 2021, the State House, both I think it was both the House as well as the Senate, passed R-113, resolving that racism is a public health emergency and committing the legislature to, and I quote, sustained and deep work in eradicating systemic racism throughout the state, actively fighting racist practices and participating in the creation of more just and equitable systems. That's from that resolution. Certainly prior to that resolution, Susanna Davis, the executive director of racial equity, was brought on board to address those concerns. In light of President Trump's actions to eliminate federally funded diversity, equity, and inclusion programs, to strengthen and the weaponization of police forces against public protest, and to pressure state police to become more compliant with mass deportation efforts handed down from the federal government. I'm wondering how committed is our state in forwarding the promises of eradicating systemic racism, which in many ways includes resisting the pressures that are coming from the federal level.
This is, I think, the conversation or question of my life's work and of the moment. How do we get Vermonters to go from a moment to a movement, right? Much of this work on eradicating racism and addressing disparities that are racial, cultural, lingual, gender-based, based on your sexual orientation. A lot of that work was catalyzed by the murder of George Floyd. And in fact, you mentioned Senator Brock. One of the only things I've ever seen receive the sponsorship of all 30 senators was a resolution that I had advanced to honor the memory 1 year after and commit to greater action for George Floyd on the 1 year anniversary of his murder. The Democrats, thought, okay, Kesha wrote this resolution, so she's going to present it on the floor. And I said, well, actually, there's only one black man in the Senate. This was before Joe Major got there. I said, there's only one black man in the Senate. If he wants to present it, he should. Oh, we never thought about Senator Brock. He's a Republican. And so I called Senator Brock, and, I just said to him, you don't have to. I'm not trying to make this a whole thing for you, but it is yours if you want to be the one to share your thoughts and feelings. And he said yes. And he, former sheriff in Vermont, former auditor, black man, who's a Republican. Yep. And he talked about how George Floyd was murdered by Derek Chauvin, and that he generally believes police do the right thing, and they did not do that in this case. And so for me, taking something that was symbolic and making it real meant giving other people a sense of ownership in defining the problem. And I might not like how they frame things, but I know they're reaching more people than I could. And so what I think has frustrated a lot of people of color, I'll just at least speak for myself and folks I talk to and what I see happening nationally, the Democrats have tended to do symbolic things and then move on. And in election after election, it continues to be, black people care about policing, Asian people care about education, brown people care about immigration reform.
Those stereotypic divides that we tend to
it's, they're not doing people of color any favors by doing that. And in fact, it is going to take just major shifts in representation. And I think we saw that play out in the presidential election before we knew the result, in a way that if the Democratic Party is going to be as diverse and committed to diversity as it is, it needs to walk that walk and start letting go of power, because the Republican Party is younger by 10 years on average in Congress than Democrats, because you have a lot of folks who sort of won't let that next generation that's incredibly diverse have that same level of power, get that benefit of the doubt. So, in the aftermath of declaring racism a public health emergency and all of the work we did, I remember being in some forums that were very well facilitated by Taisha Green in Burlington, and they were online because it was during the pandemic. And there was a number of solutions that people generated about what would advance anti-racism or what would dismantle racism in Burlington and beyond. And I thought I was biased because then it was prioritized these solutions. And the number one solution that came up was greater representation on the city council and in positions of decision making. And I thought that was my bias, that we just need people to run for office. But what we've seen in largely dismantling our democracy is people believe that that's because they were wrong about something or they went overboard with something. But what it is that people are being disenfranchised in record numbers and it's making us believe that somehow that was a fever dream. And meanwhile, Democrats aren't doing their part to fight the dark money going into elections to fight disenfranchisement of voters, to fight redistricting. Now they are, but it's almost too late.
Yeah.
So you don't have, wholly red states. You have unorganized states, disenfranchised states. And I just worry that, Democrats are giving up the fight way too early and without diagnosing the problem correctly.
Yeah, I have a fear that it's not just Democrats who are giving up the fight or who have lost touch with the fight. I think the Republican Party right now is in great division. I think the number of, for instance, Republican national legislators and senators who are thinking about retiring is because they represent, you might call them a moderate conservative voice that's no longer prominent within their party, and they're wondering what to do about it. So I think we're in a state where we're in a national state of trying to recover what does it mean to be truly a democratic nation.
That's right.
And not resort to what I think a lot of people fear, that we're really swiftly moving into an oligarchy.
Right.
So how do we resist that? And I guess I want to come back to this, the resolution 113. When that was passed, several of the senators who are here now, in both, well, not only the senators but people in the House, were not present when that resolution was passed. And so there's a fear, I think, a concern, a suspicion, you might even say, on the part of Vermonters of color, is how committed is the State House to that resolution still?
Right.
Are we just gradually putting that on the shelf and forgetting about it, or is there any attempt on the part of senators and representatives to keep that energy, that commitment alive? And so I one of the things I suggested, and this would have to come, I would think, through the governor's office via Susanna Davis's office of racial equity, of some sort of continual series of workshops for state representatives and state senators on racial sensitivities, the concerns that people, not just Black Vermonters, but brown Vermonters, and people who are marginalized and experiencing all kinds of fragmentation. How do you get that message across so that all Vermonters, those who are in parts of the state where there's very little contact with people of color, alongside those who are in Chittenden County where they have more contact with people of color and more diversity. How do you get that message across, at least understood and appreciated, even though people may not agree all the time, but at least come to an awareness of what's going on in this variety of this growing variety, this growing diversity that is making up the state of Vermont. And I'm concerned because that, and I don't want to wander on too much, but
keep going.
There is a study, a survey conducted by the Public Religious Research Institute. First came out in 2013 and again in 2022, where it mentioned the majority of white Americans have no meaningful relations with people of color. And that census has not really changed between 2013 and 2022, or the present day, let's even say the present day. And so I would imagine that the concern is greater in a state like Vermont, which is the second whitest state in the Union, where that need for awareness of what is going on in this growing diversity within the state. How can we keep that commitment to Resolution 113 alive?
Yeah. Well, there's a lot in there, and it's a continuum, and it's very interpersonal all the way to societal and cultural. And, you know, even just conversations like this or things that seem low impact or thin in their level of engagement. I'm thinking of book clubs, for example, right? So when people came to my committee when I was chair of economic development, I was, by the way, the first woman to chair Senate economic development, let alone the first woman of color, and I was pregnant twice while I was chair of that committee. So they got a whole different sense of what was going on in Senate economic development. And I said to many folks as we were working on housing policy, unless you have read The Color of Law, we may not be speaking the same language about what needs to change. And for those who haven't read the book, what I mean by that is that government policy has often done more harm to people of color, and absolutely particularly Black and Indigenous people, systematically, from the federal to the state to the municipal level. And those systems are continually reinforced. And so now, even when people who don't consider themselves racist oppose a housing project or, don't want to change the character of their neighborhood, they are using a language that came from a very intentionally racist past. And the byproduct of that is that it became extremely classist and was good at keeping immigrants out of neighborhoods and, continuing to allow people with power to socially engineer what they saw and who they experienced day to day. And so for me, it was taking a very interpersonal approach to what is your lens on this work? What is your philosophy? What does the data in Vermont tell us about the loss of Black homeownership in the state over the last 50 years that we've been, proud of very strict environmental laws? And how does it change things when a woman of color is the one sitting at the head of the table saying this well-meaning policy has been used for extremely racist and classist ends? That's a lot of small things that added up to a complete shift in the conversation on who the economy is built for and who can access wealth in the state of Vermont, which is usually tied up in your property ownership. And so I don't mean to sort of divert from the question. I think it's a really critical one of what are we remaining committed to. We've passed a number of other resolutions this year that I think build on the work of Mark Hughes and Tabitha Moore and yourself and others to create a whole paradigm shift in the legislature. And so that has not made it easier to pass things like a resolution supporting Mohsen Madawi when he was incarcerated and detained in our prisons by ICE. But it gave those of us who did believe that was wrong a shared language that very much humanized that situation and also let us know that there were layers beyond that, right? Mohsen was very well known, has a grasp, not just a grasp, but an eloquence with the English language as he speaks multiple languages, was graduating from Columbia. And when he came to visit us in the State House, he said, I need you to care just as much about the 6 migrant farm workers that I was detained with, and nobody knows their name. And to be fair, Senator Welch heard that same thing from Mohsen when he visited him in prison, and those migrant farm workers got legal representation the next day.
Good.
So it is almost that capacity to stay in conversation and be willing to accept new truths and realities and being willing to admit mistakes that I believe the legislature committed to. in that resolution. And I think, and I want to say, we had 6 senators vote against that resolution to uphold the rights of due process for all. That, it was a resolution about Mosen, but just detailing an early example for all of us of what the Trump administration and what ICE was doing, giving people no due process and disappearing them into our vast national correction system before lawyers could intervene. That is step 1 on the road to fascism.
Yep.
And we had 6 senators say, I don't know, I would give ICE the benefit of the doubt that he didn't need or deserve due process in his detention. And, to be celebratory and hopeful, our judge, our U.S. Federal Circuit Judge, Judge Crawford, paved the way in the country. I mean, it was a light in that very dark moment when people were being disappeared, college students and people who'd spoken out and used their First Amendment free speech rights. Our Vermont judge, said, I'm not going to allow you to go near this man when I let him out of the courtroom.
Good. Yeah.
And, recently I've worked on the Vermont Immigration Defense Fund. So perhaps if people are wondering what to do in this dark moment, the Immigration Defense Fund has allowed us to fund, by the end of the year, 8 new positions and staff up and train people how to be immigration attorneys and advocates. Good. Something we've needed for a long time.
Yeah.
And they got a woman out of prison this weekend, 2 weekends ago, who's from Connecticut. A state senator there reached out to me 2 days before being detained, and she has 3 young boys. 2 days before being detained, she'd had a major surgery. I won't be too identifying, but she had a major life-threatening surgery. Now, I've had 2 kids, and they were difficult births, and if someone put me in a prison cell 2 days after a major medical event, I don't know if I'd survive regardless of the kind of care that I got. And thankfully for, our correction system and for Judge Crawford, when she left after that horrible weekend that she was detained, Judge Crawford put a restraining order against ICE for this woman, saying, she just had surgery. I don't want to see you go near this woman for at least 120 days. That's as long as I can keep you away from her. We have individuals stepping up in a system to resist in a way that we can be proud of as Vermonters.
Yeah.
And it keeps me going to know those stories of people who are putting themselves at great personal risk or, spending time and money they don't have to help somebody else. I'm going to barn meetings for these indivisible groups around the state. Like I went to one in Richmond for Camel's Hump Indivisible, kind of your neck of the woods.
It is.
And there were over 100 people there in a barn with a rainbow in the sky to talk about how do we resist and actually make a difference. And so, I guess that's just to say it could be really depressing if people just stay online and on social media and read the headlines.
Yeah.
I slip into it myself. But if you go out and make friends with people who don't look like you and build trust with people across difference and all say together, what's happening right now is not okay, we will move mountains.
Yeah. And I guess I feel that it is difficult where you have, again, a state that is demographically such where 90 plus people are white. And because of those demographics, there is very little meaningful association with people. And I'm hoping that there can be some intentionality that arises from the passage and commitment to R113 on the part of the state, on the part of the governor's office. Again, I know that Susanna Davis is probably overwhelmed by issues such as this. The ACLU, Vermont ACLU, has been concerned that our state law enforcement officials are probably giving in too easily to the pressures of ICE and the Trump administration. And so there needs to be conversation to the point where the message can be embraced throughout the state that Vermont is or is trying to be a sanctuary state in many ways.
Yes.
So I will continue to press that.
Yes.
I'll let you know about it. I will see if the governor's office is open to this idea of at least providing some means by which the State House can continue the legacy that was started with R-113, and how is that defined in the work that we do, in the interactions that we make with one another?
When George Floyd was murdered, the governor's quote was something like, and this was the day of mourning that happened, I think a few days later, and by then he had shared a statement that we cannot just deny what we saw with our own eyes.
Yeah.
And that's what worries me right now, is we are right now starting to live in different realities where we are denying what we're seeing with our own eyes. And it's hard to climb out of that dark place right now of feeling isolation or just terror that we are experiencing national events in very different ways. And we just saw this with the murder of Charlie Kirk. While many people were trying to figure out who he even was, Democrats were getting blamed, immigrants were getting blamed for this murder. And, we still don't know all of the information, but it was a frightening conversation that was fueled by our political leaders in this moment. And all I said to my colleagues in the Senate was something I had read, which was, the more you use politically violent rhetoric as elected officials, the more incidents of political violence you see.
Yep.
It seems pretty plain on its face, but it's a reason to never condone violence and to constantly be reinforcing the language of nonviolence. But it's also really frightening when one side is using the language of nonviolence and one is using the language of violence. It's putting us in a terrifying position. It is, probably that next step on the road to fascism. And so I just want everyone to know, but particularly immigrants and Vermonters of color, we hear you, we see you, we feel that this is a very scary time where people are packing bags, making plans for their kids and grandkids. We're getting phone calls from people who need standby guardians in case they get taken. When the governor said we're not a sanctuary city, it couldn't help but, I imagine in the times of slavery, the governor here also didn't say, we're a state that welcomes, fugitive slaves and we want to be a land of free people. He did not. But many people on the ground were welcoming folks and saving lives and helping people get their freedom. So what I've been heartened by is that people are not looking to any elected leader to tell them, for the most part, what to do, maybe how to be helpful so that some of us who are trying to do good work can continue that good work. But in the meantime, it is individual people risking their reputations and their lives to help other people in a very dangerous moment.
Yeah, kind of a new underground railroad is developing.
That is exactly what's happening, and I'm just heartened by the folks I meet along the way in that underground railroad.
Yeah.
That's where we are.
Yeah. Well, I'm just looking.
I know, this is a real talk.
Yeah,
this
it
is
is,
real
it is.
talk, folks.
Your counterpart in the Senate
Yes.
is Scott Beck.
Yes.
And I know a lot of people who are probably unfamiliar with politics, even though I find that hard to believe nowadays, are wondering what really distinguishes Republicans from Democrats. There seems to be a clear dividing line on the national level, where you have these blue and red states and so on. But in Vermont, it's kind of a different ball game. Many people in the Republican Party of Vermont are not fans of Trump. So what distinguishes Vermont Democrats, as far as you're concerned, from Vermont Republicans?
You know, I'll answer that question first by, and I may be harder on Democrats because I am one. I mean, it might be weird to hear the Senate Democratic Majority Leader talk about what Democrats could do differently, but I think that's why I was elected to this role after we lost seats. You know, it is what does distinguish us? Who are we? And in many ways, we may have gone too far in trying to distinguish ourselves from Republicans in the less obvious ways. I mean, we believe in civil rights. We believe in people's rights to determine their own medical care, their own sexuality, their own identity. I think we could go into some of the social issues where we have differences, although we are proud that the governor has stood with us sometimes on things like reproductive rights and protecting transgender kids. And at the same time, we may have created too high of a bar for people to be under our tent. I think we do have to reimagine ourselves economically. We were, and hopefully still are and can be, the party of working people. I have done a lot of labor work as chair of Senate Economic Development, and I have had to remind fellow Democrats that labor is a pillar of our coalition. So what's interesting is you see in Vermont a lieutenant governor who switched parties and became a Republican and was successful. And we just learned today in Georgia, we have a former lieutenant governor who is a Republican who's running as a Democrat. This is one of those moments in history, it happens about every 50 or 60 years, where the whole nation is asking, what is my coalition? And who do I stand with? And I believe in a Democratic Party that has working people, and that includes and is largely made up of people of color and low-income families and women. That those folks are at the center of our work, but I do think they have not felt centered in our work. And we do have to have a stronger economic message for folks, because we believe in good government, but good government doesn't mean government runs everything. It means that government facilitates working people to be able to thrive and succeed and own a home and believe that there is some piece of the American dream that's out there for them, and that the economy and our democracy are not rigged against them. And I think we just haven't put enough of our attention there. So, for example, we have looked at programs that would be helpful to, new moms, new parents, paid family leave. But when we looked at creating a program, it was more expensive to run the program than the amount of benefit that we would be giving out. Democrats, and if we have the majority, whoever is in charge, has to be able to hold a mirror up to themselves and really be honest about what they see. And sometimes when you have that big of a majority, you just don't have to do that hard work as much.
Yeah.
So, there was a time when the Senate just proposed everyone should get paid leave, or at least all parents. We know they just had a baby. It's on the forms already. Just give them paid leave. And I would say, as somebody who just had 2 kids, there's a need for everybody to have time off.
Yeah.
We can't have just gone through pandemics and floods and still believe that some people are worthy of time to take care of their affairs and be with their loved ones, and some people are not. And so I think Democrats have just tied themselves in knots too much, and they've been very expensive knots. And people just want common sense solutions that work. It's, on everyone's lips that, we were the party of good government, but government is not working right now.
Yeah.
And so we own that. We just own that. And while they're trying to dismantle government, we need to make government an intentional partner again to the people.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, that's going to be an uphill fight, but I think it's going to be worth it.
I hope so.
We have a few minutes left, and I know that one of the areas that you are deeply concerned about, and that not just you as a Democrat, but I know Republicans are as well, is housing. The access to decent housing, affordable housing, is still a challenge here in the state. I know for a while I participated in a government initiated program called Land Access and Opportunity. You were very helpful.
I just met with its leaders this morning.
Yeah, and I'm wondering to what extent is that viable in a time when HUD has been pretty much gutted by the Trump administration, and to what extent is affordable housing available, especially for low-income and middle-income Vermonters?
Well, and I'm biased because I just met with the leaders of the Land Access and Opportunity Board, and I think they're doing incredible work. And my whole pitch to them at this meeting was to tell their good story publicly, that every time they stand up a new effort or create a new fund of resources and support that's going directly to people on the ground doing the work, farming in the soil, building homes, that they talk about that work. Because I don't think Vermonters or, political I think when you get down to it with real folks, they don't mind if somebody else is getting some money to build their own future. They just want to make sure that money is going somewhere useful and that somebody's actually benefiting. And the Land Access and Opportunity Board, I think in many ways, is cutting red tape and helping small developers, helping small farmers.
Good.
Often what they do benefits everyone because we're seeing where there has been unnecessary overreach and regulation, and where we have made it way too expensive to earn a living and to farm your own land and to own a home. So my underlying philosophy is that when you help those who are most at the margin, everyone is better off.
Yeah.
And I need organizations like the LAOB who prove that every day with their work, because other people are benefiting from, just a couple $1 million we've put into them completely changing systems so they work better for our small farmers and our small businesses.
Yeah. Well, again, that's a topic that's worth pursuing, and we're going to devote more time to that, especially as
Have them on.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
They're on my agenda.
Good.
State income tax
Yes.
is a major means by which Vermont generates revenue to fund programs. Any effort to increase taxes in the state often is viewed negatively, partly because many middle-income Vermonters feel that the burden is placed mostly upon them. In 2023, the Vermont ACLU issued a statement saying that Vermonters earning more than $500,000 a year or better should start paying their fair share of the tax burden. that would help as far as housing, social services, infrastructure, education, the environment, and so on. What are your thoughts regarding that?
So there's, I think, a really important distinction to make that is a faulty word in that statement from the ACLU. Over half of those who would be taxed as earning more than $500,000 a year are having a one-time income event. They are not regular earners of $500,000 or more every year. They're not just high-earning Vermonters.
You're going to say over half?
Over half. Wow. Over half. So when you look at us increasing that tax by 3% that was proposed and getting $75 million, if you decided, but we don't want to tax people having a one-time income event because they're selling a house or taking their retirement, that number gets cut more than in half. So my goal was for us to just have an honest conversation about how much money we were talking about and what the best use of it is. And I don't think we've gotten to the place in past sessions where we could agree on that. And I think that, just looked maybe to folks like, we aren't willing to do politically challenging things in raising taxes. But I grew up in the School of House, Ways and Means 10 years ago when we were trying to do single-payer health care and other efforts where the question was, but what are you going to use the money for? And Vermonters, that question's in our Constitution, that money ought to stay in the pocket of Vermonters unless we have a better use for it that serves the public good. And in fact, I care a lot about housing. So I was an interesting spokesperson for saying, I don't think that money, that let's say it's $30 to $70 million, I don't think that's money well spent on housing right now because the cost of affordable housing unit is between $600,000 and $800,000 per unit.
That's crazy.
So we'd be telling Vermonters we're going to tax rich people and solve the housing crisis, and we might get 100 units of housing out of that. So we had to do a lot of other work to show Vermonters, and we still have to do that work, that the money would be better off spent on the public good than staying in their pockets. And if we kept the tax as it is, it would hit a lot of middle-income people who consider selling their house or taking their retirement as their one opportunity to enjoy any wealth or any savings that they've built up. And so if we're going to have this conversation seriously, we need to reckon with that. And if Vermonters are going to agree that there's money that needs to be spent, I'm speaking out of turn, but it's probably going to be on ensuring blood isn't running in the streets. And by that I mean our healthcare system is under incredible strain. And it's under strain from a lot of other systems that are failing. And people are ending up spending $1,300 a night on an emergency room bed or $260 a night on incarceration when they just need a roof over their head. And so
this is both state and nationally.
Exactly. Solving these crises is getting more and more expensive. And if we just add more money to that without solving the underlying issues, we run out of runway. And so, that's not a reason to become paralyzed. I have no problem having this conversation, but we have to take a really frank and honest look about what we would achieve and if Vermonters would get the value.
Is there any initiative that you see in which that conversation might happen?
I would like more partnership from the governor. I will say that because the answer can't be that our hospitals are just too expensive. I really value having an academic, research-based medical facility in the state. It's a gem, and I value access to rural health care. So can we make more sense of the system? Yes, we do need the power and the personnel of thousands of state workers to solve our problems, it's not going to come from, a piece of paper in the legislature.
Yeah.
But we need to make sure we're having a conversation that really addresses the root causes of our healthcare crisis, our cost of living crisis, our homelessness crisis. Most Vermonters have now accepted that these are crises, and they want to know how we're going to work together to solve them.
Good. Yeah, sometimes it involves walking up to the precipice and saying, I can't go any further. We need to solve this.
Yes.
So that we're not lemmings going over the cliff with.
Listen, we need some spiritual guidance in our work. It's always been a privilege to have you speak in the State House, and I remember the day we were debating our changes in homelessness policy. We had a rabbi from Montpelier come in and say, if not us, who?
Yeah.
If not now, when? And I think many of us carried that through the entire session.
Good.
So we don't have all the answers, but we're certainly searching high and low and finding that a lot of Vermonters want to help, want to be part of the solutions. And our job is to just bring them to the table and make sure they feel affirmed and heard and supported in all of the critical community efforts that they're engaged in.
Well, Senator, we will work together in trying to make that happen.
Thank you, Reverend.
Kesha Ram, Senate Majority Leader of the House, of the Senate. It is so good to have you here.
Thank you.
And most likely we'll be calling on you again, especially during the midterm election year, to get your point of view as well as those of your colleagues on the other side of the aisle as well as in the House. So we'll be in touch.
Thank you for holding us accountable to having hard conversations.
This is a pleasure. Blessings upon your family, Jacob, and your daughters, and again, thank you for joining us, and thank you for being a part of this session of the Talk Vermont. Be safe, be well, and be blessed. Take care.
Let's talk about our hopes and dreams beyond the reach it seems. Let's talk, confess I live in hell. I failed to fall this game. Maybe we can find a pathway forward or a clue. So we may together be a symbiotic harmony where I can talk to you, you can talk to me. Let's talk, let's talk. Let's talk, let's talk, let's talk.